Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, it's still pretty early for me. It's only 11 o'clock in the morning here, so again, I'm gonna go through what I know. It's gonna be a weird layout for today because, again, I want to leave myself an opportunity to find more news. We're going to rip through the news and notes that have come up. Nothing necessarily earth-shattering aside from the Geno news, which we'll get to. Then I wanted to take a step back into the draft. I want to go through some of the most recent mock drafts, kind of see what's out there, particularly obviously highlighting the Green Bay Packers mocks, but just kind of seeing if there's any kind of shakeups since the combine, et cetera, et cetera. And then again, kind of leaving open the backside for anything new and interesting on the other end. So it may be a third segment that is more news, which again is kind of a weird layout, but it's how I want to do it. Otherwise, it may just be more draft stuff or whatever if there's no interesting news, which I'm hoping isn't the case. Just a reminder from what you should have heard yesterday, there is a link on my social medias, which I'm actually going to do right now so I don't forget, for Mr. Der Trader, also known as Jared the Uber driver from Texas, I think? Yes, from Texas. If you've been listening for a while, you know every once in a rare while a listener goes through a hard time to varying degrees, all kinds of tragedies that people have endured, and I have just kind of thrown it out there. You know, I know a lot of you guys really like to help. You guys have helped me a ton over the years, and I want to give you the opportunity to help fellow listeners and people that contribute to the call-in. So I will be putting these on the different social medias. If you want to throw $1, $2, $10, $100, $1,000, $1 million. Actually, if you want to give away $1 million, I would encourage you to not help Jared and, in fact, help me. I'm just kidding. But for real, like, you know, give me a couple bucks or something, you know. Tell you what, Jared, if they give you $1 million, you know what I mean? Like, take what you need and, like, buy me a steak or something, all right? I'm just saying. But anyways, again, Pack_Daddy or the Packernet Podcast Facebook group, all the different places that you may find me. Otherwise, as has happened several times, if you just can't find it, just reach out and I'll get you the link. But do what you can. All right. I can't promise this is going to be in any kind of a particular order because I have like 40 different notes and I'm not going to sit here and organize these like I usually do. So I'm just going to start grabbing. So why don't we go ahead and start with this since it already came up. The big news of the day, the Seahawks are trading quarterback Geno Smith to the Raiders, reuniting him with Coach Pete Carroll, per the insiders, as Seattle hits reset. It's a third round pick going to Seattle, and a new quarterback for Las Vegas. Several things come to mind. First of all, it was pretty surprising. This has been speculated. I've seen a couple different things pop up already. The big, what the heck was it, 49ers guy or whatever was talking about how the Pete Carroll was having a meeting with these guys, and so there was some speculation about it. I saw something like Diana Rossini had said that the Raiders may be looking at a current quarterback, and you know, so it's shocking, but also it's kind of been very out there in retrospect. Still, this is going to shake up some things as far as, for example, the NFL draft. The Raiders are no longer looking for a quarterback. The Seahawks are, and it's kind of surprising, although it sounds like we're moving pretty rapidly in the direction of them having a quarterback, or at least being close to having a quarterback. The main thought right now is that it's going to be Sam Darnold. We went very rapidly from, it looks like the Vikings are bringing him back, which, I mean, even to this day, I saw a report very recently the Vikings are looking to bring him back, and then it was just rapid fire. He's not coming back. They don't want him back. They're going in a different direction, and the Seahawks, well, let me just read this. The Athletic's Diana Rossini reports decision-makers around the league expect Sam Darnold to sign a multi-year deal with the Seahawks. Seahawks trade of Geno Smith to the Raiders appears to have cleared the way for the team to start a run at Sam Darnold in free agency. Darnold, who turns 28 in June, is said to be looking for a 3-year deal. Now, I really didn't understand this move from the Seahawks standpoint. I understand resetting, but having absolutely no plan at quarterback seems stupid, unless you're actually going to pull the move that I always felt was reasonable. If you're going to blow it up, make sure you don't have a quarterback, and then try to get a high pick in a different draft class where there's better quarterback options. Presumably, I don't know. I mean, there's usually good quarterback options. This is one of the few rare, once every 3, 4, 5 years where it's like, not great. Not great, Bob. But the point is, it's very possible also that they are very much in talks with the, with Sam Darnold in his camp, I guess. Although I don't even know if they can do that. I don't know his status. That actually makes a lot of sense. Because I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, okay, you're not going to release Geno unless you have a plan. But if you had a plan in place for Sam Darnold, wouldn't we already see something? And the answer is no, because it's not the legal tampering period, so you can't talk to the guy and you can't sign the guy. Which, there's two ways to look at that. One, it is crazy because they actually haven't talked to anybody. On the other hand, let's not be stupid, they very likely already have a plan in place with Sam Darnold, and we're not willing to release Geno or trade Geno until they had something essentially in writing or a handshake agreement. But of course, you're not allowed to actually have a handshake agreement. But at the same time, would they have really moved on from Geno if they didn't know what their plan was going to be? And number two, would decision makers around the league already have details? Not necessarily, but would be of the opinion that Sam Darnold will sign a multi-year deal with the Seahawks? I mean, maybe I'm being too much of a cynic. I don't know. But if you were to ask me exactly what happened, the Seahawks have been talking to Pete Carroll about a trade, which is legal. It's a trade. It's not free agency. The Seahawks are very much in the throes of a tear-down rebuild. It maybe wasn't at the forefront of their mind to move on from Geno, but at the same time, why not? They thought, they kind of worked something out, but they're like, let's see, we don't really have a plan at quarterback. Let's see what we can do. You have some secret under-the-table meetings with Sam Darnold, and they agree tentatively on a multi-year deal, at which point the Seahawks pull the trigger on a trade and now wait a couple days for the legal tampering period, at which point it will be announced that Sam Darnold will be signing a multi-year deal with the Seahawks. Again, maybe that's not the case, but if you had to ask me my best guess, that's probably what it is. They have a pretty good idea Sam Darnold is going to be interested. It's also funny to me how, again, the Vikings seemed to want him back, and they were very interested in that. Suddenly, the Vikings no longer have interest, and it seems like everybody understands Sam Darnold's going somewhere. It feels like a deal got done and everybody's aware of it, but they're just not allowed to say it, so we're just playing this weird game where it's like, oh, actually, I have a different opinion about what might happen. And we all have the exact same opinion, which is very different from what yesterday's opinion was. Like, okay, that's probably what it is. That's fine. That makes sense. But, as I said, it kind of shakes up a few things, the Raiders being one of them as far as what they're going to be doing and not doing in the draft. It clears the way for the Giants a little bit in terms of if they did want to trade up in the draft, you're probably not competing with the Raiders anymore. Seahawks are not going to be an added competition. They're not going to try to move up to 1 or whatever. But also the biggest speculation has been, will Aaron Rodgers now go to the Minnesota Vikings? That has been the massive buzz surrounding this situation. NFL Network's Mike Garafolo reports that Aaron Rodgers, quote, could be in play, unquote, for the Vikings if the team is unable to re-sign Daniel Jones. Garafolo believes the Seahawks trade of Geno Smith, Geno Smith to the Raiders appears to have started some quarterback chaos. With Sam Darnold expected to leave Minnesota, the Vikings are focused on Daniel Jones. However, if Jones doesn't re-sign, Rodgers could be in play for the Vikings. It's so weird that it's Rodgers' plan B to Daniel Jones. What are you talking about? According to Garafolo, Rodgers, the longtime Packer quarterback who flamed out with the Jets, would complete the full Brett Favre cycle if he ends up with the Vikings. It's unlikely to actually happen given Rodgers' likely preference to start and the presence of former top 10 overall pick J.J. McCarthy, who's returning from a torn meniscus. Look, I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but it does make sense for several reasons that a lot of other places didn't. The Giants didn't make sense from Aaron Rodgers' standpoint. Maybe Rodgers doesn't want to be a Viking. Number one, because he doesn't want to completely follow in Aaron Rodgers' shadow, even though he's again, it's been very close up to this point. Do you really want to play that whole game? Number two, we are quite sure he would never want to be a Chicago Bear. I don't know if that extends to the Minnesota Vikings as a rival. I don't know. There also is, very similar to Brett Favre, he wanted to play the Packers. And I could see Aaron Rodgers. The whole Jets thing was about getting back at the Packers largely, right? He still wanted to prove something, whatever. Now you can not only prove something, but you can do it by smashing the Packers in the mouth with Justin Jefferson, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes more sense for Aaron Rodgers than anything else that I've heard so far. The only question is, do the Vikings want to do it? And I don't know why they necessarily wouldn't. I mean, J.J. McCarthy is what you're looking for, but you have no... The point was for him to sit, and then you wait until he's ready. How in the world is he now just ready? How do you know that he's ready? He hasn't had an opportunity to do anything. You saw him one off season, and then he tore his ACL, and you never saw him again. He's not up throwing footballs around and everything, and the very little bit that you may have seen of that doesn't prove anything. So you need a new option, and you need him to be healthy so that you can actually watch him and see how he's progressing through his reads and all that stuff, see him in practice and all that, and to at least get a halfway idea if he's ready. Otherwise, you might as well have just thrown him in to start last year, which, again, maybe that was going to happen. I don't know. And if you need an option, why not a good option? I mean, you went with Sam Darnold last year and did as good of a job as you did. As much as Aaron Rodgers does not seem to be himself, if you can do that with Sam Darnold, I have a feeling that you could probably find a way to have some success with Aaron Rodgers. Now, it's a different thing when you have a quarterback guru type of head coach that's able to find ways to make it work. With Aaron Rodgers, that's not necessarily how it works. Aaron Rodgers is going to come in and say, no, I'm going to do it my way, which is the same old way that hasn't really worked. And so there's going to be a lot of butting heads. You got an organization that's like, we handle things here. You know, they're a little bit more of a competently run organization right now. They've got an ownership structure that is not going to be really like to be dictated to. They've got a GM that doesn't want to be told what to do. They got a head coach that's quite intelligent and has a very clear vision of how his offense is going to run, and it has nothing to do with Rodgers' plans of how he wants his offense run. But if you can get over that hump, I really hate to say how much it makes sense. The Vikings are a better team. Aaron Rodgers, it's probably his only option to come back to the NFL and actually win games and prove he's still got it. And on top of that, you get to spit right in the Packers' face with a team that was better than the Packers last year with Sam freaking Darnold. If the report is true that he still has, quote-unquote, something to prove, you're not going to the Giants. In my opinion, you're going to the Vikings or you're going to retire. But, again, I don't know. As for the other quarterbacks we've been talking about, Daniel Jeremiah had said, as far as the Steelers are concerned, he thinks it's going to be either Darnold or Fields. If I'm correct, and if everybody else is correct, that Darnold is going to Seattle, then it kind of sticks with what we've been saying for a long time, and that is Justin Fields will remain a Pittsburgh Steeler. As for Russell Wilson, Jordan Schultz, who is the guy that seems to have a bit of an attitude, doesn't like Ian Rappaport for disagreeing with him, kind of a faux insider, but maybe kind of a real insider. I don't really know. Anyways, he says the Giants have been in on Russell Wilson. Schultz reports Wilson is maintaining an open dialogue with the Steelers, but that both he and Fields appear to have strong free agent markets. The Steelers have made it clear they won't be keeping both signal callers, but now the question becomes if they'll be able to keep either. The Giants could have interest in Wilson as a potential piggyback option for a first-round quarterback. So that makes things even more interesting. If Justin Fields locks up the Steelers' position, then there goes Rodgers to the Steelers. If the Giants end up taking Russell Wilson, well, there goes Rodgers to the Giants. See what I mean? As far as the constricting, there's less and less and less of a market for Aaron Rodgers, and more really just limits it down to Minnesota. And it just comes down to, would Minnesota do it or not? Daniel Jeremiah also said, as far as Justin Fields, the Jets could possibly be an option. Again, it really sounds like the Steelers are going to keep him, but if not, Jets also could be an option, apparently. Jordan Schultz added, as well as Daniel Jeremiah, that the Jets are the team that are most interested in free agent Justin Fields right now. So it's kind of one of those external pressure things where if the Steelers, you can't really mess around with it. I mean, you don't really want to offer like a serious offer to a guy like Justin Fields. You know, okay, fine, you can take the job. And the problem is there's other teams that are kind of becoming serious about Fields, and so you may have to offer something kind of serious. and soon before, free agency kicks off and the price starts to go up. The other funny thing that was brought up as far as quarterbacks and the Vikings is the funny scenario in which Kirk Cousins could return. There's almost a 0% chance of that, though, for two reasons. Number one, the Falcons just very recently said they're not giving up Kirk Cousins, which is odd, but that's a thing. And why would Minnesota bring him back? I don't really understand that. You just got out of that one-year deal cycle. I guess the only difference is he's not getting these massive one-year deal contracts. You can just throw $4 at him and he can play for a year and then be gone. But it's more of a funny concept than anything that would be real or serious. And then since we're doing quarterbacks, allow me to do this. This is just me being a little bit petty. Here's a video of Teteroa McMillan doing an interview with CBS Sports. They do a lot of these would you rather kind of things. And, I'll just play it for you.
Caleb Williams or Drake May?
Ooh, Drake May.
Drake May or Jaden Williams? I'm sorry. I'm thrown off by that. Drake May over Caleb Williams. Because?
He's so confused why she's confused. I'm sorry. I had to play that. It was the pettiness in me of him choosing Drake May over Caleb Williams, and then just the utter shock from, of course, the NFL media that still believes Caleb Williams is the greatest thing that's ever happened to humanity, and Drake May is just some bum loser. Despite the fact that Drake May was a better quarterback than Caleb Williams this past year, which is probably why Teteroa McMillan is sitting there confused. Like, oh, I guess that was the wrong answer. Now what do I say? Anyways, I'll tell you what, this is taking longer than I thought. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We got some more news. We got a lot more news to talk about. We'll be right back. All right, this just came across the wire for me, so why don't we talk about it? The Chiefs just re-signed Hollywood Brown. It's not the most interesting news in a vacuum, but when you pair it with the latest news about their second-year player, Xavier Worthy, it kind of starts to make sense. So Xavier Worthy is a rookie, this past year, rookie wide receiver, one of 15 that actually played some significant snaps. He obviously played the most games. He played in 20 games, had 925 yards and 9 touchdowns. That's second in touchdowns, fourth in yards. As far as his PFF grade, not the greatest, but a 72 grade. So the Chiefs obviously have been going in the wrong direction. They've got one old, burned-out tight end. They really need some help. They don't have much by way of running back. And so they go get Xavier Worthy. And I was not super thrilled about it, especially since they were all talking about how he's going to make a big impact in these games, and he ended up doing so. The last 2 games in particular, he really blew up, and so it became this big thing. Xavier Worthy, unfortunately, has been a massive off-the-field headache. Now, again, like with all these things, I don't know full details, we'll wait for things to happen. But here's the report. Xavier Worthy was arrested Friday evening in Williamson County, Texas, on domestic assault charges. Worthy has been charged with assault against a family or household member by impeding their breathing or circulation. The 21-year-old will face serious consequences from the criminal justice system and could also face a possible suspension from the NFL under the league's personal conduct policy once the legal process unfolds. We'll have additional updates, blah, 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 blah. So, as a result of this rookie, really, I don't know what exactly is going to happen from this. I would assume it's going to be significantly lesser charges than what some other people would get because he's got a lot of money and whatnot. But he's certainly going to be facing suspension, and I don't know if the Chiefs are going to do the quote-unquote right thing, but there's always a chance that they're going to be needing to drop this person. Let's be honest. These are the kinds of things that I understand winning championships is important. I really do. And it sucks when this stuff happens, but you've got to have the ability to walk away from stuff like this. If it turns out to be true, they had an issue with Rashee Rice. They've had a lot of issues with guys having legal problems. But apparently he is currently being charged with a third-degree felony in Texas. It carries with it a 2 to 10 year prison sentence, but it's very likely to come to that. Judge could simply impose a community supervision, a probation, and the charges could also be reduced, to a misdemeanor assault charge, et cetera, et cetera. So again, very unlikely that anything massively serious is going to come of this. But I would be surprised if Xavier Worthy is playing for the Chiefs next year, because there absolutely needs to be at least a suspension. If, again, following the court proceedings, everything ends up, holding up in court and not being, as his lawyer has said, a baseless charge. If that is the case, let's just be completely honest. If that was the case, Hollywood Brown wouldn't be a Chief right now. So, Chiefs are not having a good time, man. They're just not having a good time. And I am not trying to gloat, because it's a horrible situation and it's terrible for the victim and everything else. But I just want to say two things. Number one, the Chiefs are not doing a good job of maintaining this team that they have, which I've been saying, and I'd just like to continue pointing that out. And number two, although I don't like the way in which it's happening, their downfall makes me happy. Okay? That's all I'm saying. By the way, to their credit, I did look into it to see if there were any red flags of Xavier Worthy coming out of college. I wasn't able to find any. So, if there were, it would be a little bit more of a serves you right situation. But considering there weren't, not to say that there couldn't have been, the security detail goes through the whole rigmarole that's much more intensive, that maybe other teams may have identified as a potential. Let me just talk about it, because I was going to mention it if I found something. Let me just say it anyways. I've been saying many times how the Packers tend to go after the nice guys, and I appreciate that it does wonders for the locker room and all that stuff as far as not having super cancerous things generally. We don't usually have big problems with criminal activities and whatnot, aside from like some minor marijuana charges or something. Internet is 15,407 days old today, according to this random stat. Sorry. But I've said numerous times, it would be nice to kind of push that line a little bit, Find some guys that are a little not right in the head. The problem with that is it is a ticking time bomb, because eventually you're going to find stuff like this. It's always been kind of a thing. It's maybe not as much today. I know, back in the 70s or whatever, a lot of football players were all these guys with missing teeth that, whether it was because of football or bar fights, they were just like biker gang type guys. And maybe that's not necessarily the case, but it's a little bit the case still today. These are type A personalities. They're different people than just your average person you'd walk across, down the street. So, you're going to have some issues here and again. And, sometimes it works in your favor. You find these guys that got a little bit of a screw loose, and they just end up putting it all on the field. And then I forget exactly who it was, if it was Nitschke or some other people or whatever. But, they talk about, I think it was Nitschke, where they're like, this guy's a psychopath on the field, but off the field, he's a teddy bear. That's like the perfect kind of human being. That's the football player you're after. But it's not always that clean. Some people can't just turn that switch on and off very easily. But I guess what I'm saying is it's in moments like this that I appreciate a little bit more that the Packers are a little extra and possibly overcautious when it comes to their personality profiles that they tend to look for. Because this would be pretty upsetting if a Packers player that, especially, he's a rookie and he's really starting to break out and it looks exciting, and, he's this big, fast, not big necessarily, but this fast. I remember talking about, should we draft him to pair with Christian Watson to be that extra speed threat and all this stuff, and he breaks out down the stretch, and then you hear him do something like that, and it's like, I can't even root for the guy anymore, I don't want to have to say it, but I don't think he should be on the team anymore. I don't want to have to do that and have those conversations. So I appreciate Brian Gutekunst and the Packers and all the people prior to him and with him and everything that have avoided putting us in those horrible situations up to this point. It's probably going to happen at some point. It's unavoidable, but all right, what else we got here? The Raiders released center Andre James. Could that be an option for the Packers? He would be, in my opinion, an option as a depth piece. As I mentioned before, we do need some depth there. Wouldn't be my favorite option outside of that. Definitely not. I'll be honest, he's probably a better option at center than Myers is. With that said, though, would not be my favorite option just in general. He is just a center, too, for anybody that's wondering. So if you saw the news about Raiders center Andre James being released and you were wondering, now you have my thoughts. Similarly, kind of big news for some people anyways, Harold Landry was released by the Titans. If you're wondering how I feel about Harold Landry, you just haven't been listening closely enough, because I've been, during the mock drafts, talking about how the Titans need edge help because Harold Landry's been there forever and has just never really been good enough. And now they've finally given up on the guy. There's no reason to believe that Harold Landry would be a legitimate option as far as the problem we're trying to solve of we need a guy that's going to help us get home with 4. Plus, he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. I don't want him for any real reason whatsoever. There's also been a lot of news that the Vikings are going to allow cornerback Byron Murphy to test the market. He is 27 years old. He spent 4 years in Arizona, 2 years in Minnesota. He was a second-round pick back in 2019. He's another one that I think would be more of a depth piece than anything. He had a decent year via PFF last year, but it was his only decent year. With that said, he's always been kind of average, so at the very least, he kind of sets somewhat of a floor. But that's really all I can say, unless there is some kind of a thing with Hafley seeing him as a good fit for the scheme and thinks you can get something out of him, whatever. That's true of every piece, but absent that knowledge myself, I can just go based on what these guys have been able to do with their previous stops. And again, outside of this past year where he had a 73 grade and a 74 coverage grade, he gave up 779 yards, 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 5 pass breakups. That's the other thing that makes me nervous is I'm guessing the 6 interceptions is really the biggest thing here, because 779 yards and 4 touchdowns isn't the greatest. So if it's interception dependent, then it's even worse. It's not like, ooh, something happened and maybe we can get that out of him too. It's just a fluky thing. There's talk about Dallas Goedert possibly being on the move. Again, with the tight end thing, it's not really a need for us, but would I be massively opposed to a second tight end, especially a really solid one? No. Do I think it's going to happen, and do I want it to happen based on what the price is probably going to be? No. But just be aware that it's a thing, that Dallas Goedert may not return to the Eagles. Jonathan Allen, we already talked about, but he was officially released as opposed to just being rumored to be released. Hilariously, there's been talk about Tyler Lockett, who was released, possibly coming back. Don't understand that so much, but okay. By back, I mean back to the Seahawks. Guard for the Houston Texans, Shaq Mason, was released. Shaq Mason's kind of a... He's a big name that used to be very good, but is certainly showing signs of wear, a lot of wear. He's 31 and a half years old right now. He was a very good football player in his time in New England. He left New England, went to Tampa Bay in 2022, and immediately fell off, and has been going down ever since, including his last 2 years in Houston, who has now let him go. Now, is he still kind of like a... I mean, it's not there. I mean, if you could see a path for him kind of getting back to what he was, but being what his age is, I don't think so. I think he's just too old and his time is basically done. It's just not the right... Again, could we possibly go there for depth? Even then, we're talking 64 pass blocking, 57 run blocking, with the arrows pointing straight down. So if he continues down, we're talking possibly in the 50s as a pass blocker and low 50s as a run blocker. I don't want any part of that. I just don't. Another thing that really hasn't come up because it's a really slim possibility, but it is a possibility, is the Micah Parsons situation. As of right now, it's kind of assumed that he'll be back with Dallas, but that the contract negotiations there are ongoing. There are quote-unquote general conversations happening, but these things can turn ugly pretty quickly, and so it's worth noting, until a deal gets done, the deal hasn't been done. How's that for profound? All right, well, I guess we'll just we'll take a break. We'll come back. We got still more news. This took a lot longer than I thought. So I guess anything massive happens, we'll either do a breaking news pod or just save it for tomorrow. Take a break. We'll be right back. I knew it was a long list of notes. Usually it's like one sentence, move on, one sentence, move on. All right, so I'd kind of alluded to this before, the Myles Garrett situation. I want to kind of go through the details here. So, as has been talked about quite a bit, Myles Garrett did officially ask for a trade from the Cleveland Browns, and the Cleveland Browns have really not been willing to do so. Apparently, there were private talks that went on for weeks where he, as well as his agent, Nicole Lynn, sat down privately with the Browns and, basically said, there's no future here, right? Like, there might be money, but I'm 30 years old and I want to go win something. That apparently was kept private and under wraps for weeks, and there was no progress being made, and so they made that public during Super Bowl week. The intention there was to kind of force the Cleveland Browns' hand, intensify the situation, hope to get some kind of a resolution. However, the Browns are still completely unmoved and are basically just ignoring this entire thing, going, no, he's not going anywhere. It has now reached the point where Garrett has said that he is willing to miss games in 2025 if he's not traded. So, this is kind of reminiscent of when Aaron Rodgers wanted to be traded and was, apparently saying, I want Goot fired and all this stuff. And Gutekunst said, nope, too bad you're playing here. And, the only card left for Rodgers would have been to say, I will miss games. And that was the final card. And that didn't end up happening. He came back, he played. They had to work out, whatever details, but that would have been the only real card left. And right now, already, Myles Garrett is pulling that card. I will not play for you. He said he feels like a Ferrari in a used car parking lot. However, from owner Jimmy Haslam to GM Andrew Berry to the head coach, the Browns are aligned on an offseason plan that excludes trading Garrett, viewing him as a generational talent and future Hall of Famer, and, again, from top to bottom, just saying absolutely no chance. Apparently, it's to the point for the Browns where Haslam, the owner, will not even meet with him. So Myles Garrett is saying, I want to meet with the top dog. I want to have a conversation with the top decision maker, and essentially Haslam has said no. He sends the GM to go speak with him, and the GM essentially just says the answer is no, so there's no real reason for you to talk to anybody else. And I'll be honest, like I always appreciate Brian Gutekunst's stance on being unmoved. But that's only in situations where what you're trying to do is the right decision, right? When Rodgers wanted to leave, he said no, and Rodgers came back. When they wanted Rodgers to leave, everyone was freaking out, like, you can't do that, you have no leverage. He held his ground, said, you will not play here, and he ended up getting his way, right? He's on the... Holding your ground on the wrong position is the wrong position. Myles Garrett is a generational player that you should never let go. He's also 30 years old, and your team has no future. You have nothing. You could get multiple first-round picks. Apparently, there are no multiple first-round pick offers right now, but as soon as you open that door, you're going to start getting some. The bottom line is, though, you got a guy who's refusing to play for you. That's going to cause even more drama. And for what? You don't have a quarterback. You're not going to get a quarterback this year. So you got multiple years. I mean, at what point does Myles Garrett help you win a Super Bowl? When he's 33 years old, 34, assuming you can get your crap together? This whole situation is stupid. And it's what leads me to believe that the Browns will be the one to eventually cave. If Myles Garrett genuinely doesn't care about money and really is just saying, I have all the money I need, I want to go play for a contender, then he has no real reservations about sitting out, aside from the fact that I could be on a winning team right now. But assuming that's the case, he's going to hold out. And why would the Browns not cave? Who cares? But apparently they've been a very mismanaged team basically since we've known they've been mismanaged for a long time. I would contend that they had a little window when Dorsey went there, who I've been saying for a long time. He's the guy that got Mahomes in for the Chiefs, and then he goes to the Browns, and for the first time, they become contenders. They cut a ton of people. They bring in a ton of people. They get a brand new quarterback. They start to compete. They start to actually be good. He leaves. He goes to Detroit. Detroit starts being good. And now the Browns are spiraling back down to what they have been because their ownership is complete garbage. And the one good decision they made, they let walk out the door, and now everything's falling apart again. But not only did they go get a new quarterback that was a complete and utter disaster, but they've been giving away picks, which makes no sense whatsoever. So they don't have a lot of picks. Their cap situation is not, it's a disgrace. Usually when you're a bad team, you have tons of cap space and you have a ton of like really early picks. They have neither. He's 30. Let him go. Let him go. Let him go. But doesn't look like that's going to happen. At this point, pending some kind of a freaking wake-up call from these idiots, this is going to carry on through the season. So we'll see. Maybe there'll be some trade that takes place through training camp or something, and the Packers could try to get him then, trade a 2026 or something. I don't know, but don't expect that to materialize anytime necessarily soon. The Browns are so far from budging right now, at least that's what they're posturing. Again, not even allowing Garrett to meet with the owner, just basically going, nah, there's no point. You don't need to talk to me. Talk to him so he can tell you no. That's just crazy. As for DK Metcalf, there isn't a ton. Mike Garafolo did say on Puck Sports that the Raiders, Packers, and Panthers are in on DK Metcalf. That's really all that there is. It's kind of a little bit of a where there's smoke, there's fire thing with the Packers and DK Metcalf. Again, it could just be one fallacious report or one agent trying to use the Packers as leverage, which does happen. That's kind of spreading the misinformation. But there have been multiple reports now of people bringing up teams and the Packers being one of those teams. DK Metcalf did say he wanted to play somewhere warm, which would exclude the Green Bay Packers. And also, it really goes to what other people who have called in have talked about not wanting DK for personality reasons. Look, I get it. I would much rather play somewhere warm. I would want to go play somewhere in Texas or Florida or something cool. I mean, it would be hot, which would kind of suck, I guess, but that would just be my preference. I'd rather live there, the Titans, Tennessee, Carolina. But at the same time, there's a very limited window where you can be an NFL football player, and money and success should really be your only focus. You can buy yourself a nice house somewhere you'd rather live at a different time. To not have that foresight, especially as you're starting to get older, you've got maybe one more contract left in you, and you're worried about your vacation home? If that's true, that's a little short-sighted and stupid and not super great as far as my hope that maybe you will come here and be a mature person whose sole focus is winning, which is the kind of person we want here. If you're saying what I really want is nice weather and a nice sunny beach and all this stuff, it's like, okay, I don't know that you're going to fit in great with the kind of people that we're looking to bring in here. So I guess bottom line, it kind of works itself out. Either what he said he didn't mean in any serious capacity, or he didn't say it, in which case he might still come here, or he said it and he meant it and he won't come here and it'll just take care of itself. I think that's one of the actual benefits of Green Bay, Wisconsin that I've said before. Like, oh, nobody would ever go there. Yes, some people would come here, but the people that you don't want here won't come here. The people that are like, oh, no, I want city life. They don't come here. Good. I don't want them here. So I want to be out on the ocean. I want that nice, nice suntan from, Miami or whatever. That's what I'm looking for. Good, go there. You come to Wisconsin if you really care about football. Who would want to go to Wisconsin? Somebody that genuinely wants to and cares a lot about football. If you want to win, if you want to be a part of a culture that is all about football in and outside of the building, if you want to be a part of a great organization that cares only about football and doesn't have an owner that's got ulterior motives outside of just caring about being a good football team and doing things the right way, even if it's not just bringing immediate results, satisfying, your immediate hungers. And then as for Trey Hendrickson, the last of the kind of the news of the big guys we're all looking at, some kind of conflicting reports. The one that I absolutely do not believe is the report from Jonathan Jones, lead insider for NFL on CBS, who said that the Bengals are seeking a late second-round pick or early third-round pick for Trey Hendrickson. That never made any sense. And is kind of curtailed by this report from Ian Rappaport.
I'm going to focus in on the edge market here, focus in on what Tom and I mentioned yesterday, which is that Trey Hendrickson does have permission to seek a trade. Myles Garrett wants permission to seek a trade and wants to be traded. Trey Hendrickson actually has it. And my understanding here, guys, is that when Trey Hendrickson went to the Bengals with this saying, I would like to be traded, I'd like to explore, the thought was that he could go for a first-round pick. He could go for a premium pick. And so the Bengals were basically like, if you can go for a first-round pick, explore that. Talk to teams. They certainly have had some level of interest, the Bengals have. But these veteran trades, just like the trade, we told you about earlier in the show, with Geno Smith going for just a third, they're never quite as much as you think they are, because a lot of times they're with older players. Trey Hendrickson, certainly an older player. The NFL sack leader, yes, for sure, but also wants a new contract. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. It can be done. But for the Bengals to get a premium pick for Trey Hendrickson and agree to move on from, a lot of things need to happen.
So I don't know about you, but I didn't hear third-round pick. What I heard was Hendrickson said, hey, why don't you let me go out and prove that I can fetch you guys a first-round pick? And then this team that never engages in trades is like, look, bro, if you can get us a first-round pick as a 30-year-old, you go ahead and try it and see what happens. And as he said, the market generally is not as robust as you thought, meaning he's probably unlikely to be able to come back and, having found that, which would mean what? It could mean, well, first of all, he could find it, Packers or anybody else is like, all right, fine, I'll do it first. Unlikely, but, could be a thing. Number two is they come back and they're like, oh, look, all I found was like a mid to late second. And the Bengals are like, okay, fine, I guess we'll do it. Third is he doesn't come back with what was promised, and the Bengals say, yeah, that's what I thought, so let's get to work on this contract now. I have no idea what's going to happen with the Trey Hendrickson thing, but just based on what Ian Rappaport said, if I had to guess, this is going to come back around to the Bengals trying to work out a deal with him. Now, the other really interesting thing about this that I guess I didn't fully recognize is that Trey Hendrickson asked to be traded. That was the language used. Now, it's kind of nuanced, but there's a little bit of a difference between you and I are trying to work on a deal. We're not able to agree to terms, and the team says, I tell you what, why don't you go test the market, see if you can gauge the prices, and then come back to us. There's a difference between that and Hendrickson going to the team saying, I don't want to be here anymore, and I'd like to be able to be traded. Now, they could, we'll see how it goes. Again, even with that, he can come back and say, look, all I can get you is a second. And they say, sorry, that's not good enough. You're playing here or nowhere. But at least it's a little something to where, if what's it worth to you to trade me and also not have the headache of me causing a scene and, threatening to hold out and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely a better situation than what's going on with Myles Garrett. But the idea that all the Bengals want is a late second, early third round pick and they're willing to deal them, I think if that was the case, this would have been done a long time ago. Could be wrong, but I do not think that that's the reality. And then saving the best for last, the Green Bay Packers news, which is not necessarily the most interesting, but it does exist. First of all, apparently Lex Luger is being introduced into the WWE Hall of Fame. Why is that interesting? Because Lex Luger is a former offensive lineman for the Green Bay Packers. So, congratulations. Brandon McManus's contract details have come through. As we said, it's a $5 million per year deal, but the cap hit this year is just going to be $3.5 million. It's going to go up to 5.4 next year and then 6.3 the year after that. It is worth noting, though, that probably, if I had to guess, none of these will be the equivalent of this year's $5 million. So whatever $5 million is this year, we're never really going to hit that point. Could be wrong. I don't know. We'll have to see what the numbers come out to, but that's kind of the bottom line. And that's where you want to talk about the salary cap is fake. The salary cap is not fake, but these the way we visualize the APY is absolutely fake. We see $5 million per year, and we think for 3 years we're going to have to pay this person $5 million, and $5 million is what I visualize or how I feel $5 million is this year. No, it's $3.5 million this year. It's basically going to be 3.5 next year and 3.5 the year after that. Not really. It's more like 3.5, 4, and then, I don't know, 4.5 the year after that. I could do the math to tell you roughly what it would actually be, but that's kind of how these work, and it feels like magic, because it's like, how can that be when it's $5 million per year? But with the salary cap going up every year, that's essentially what it is. We will never pay him the equivalent of $5 million per year at any given year based on today's salary cap dollars. Now, in real money for McManus, I'm not saying that he's not actually getting that, because in real money, he's absolutely getting that, assuming he plays all 3 years. But just in terms of like how much it's going to hurt us, got to change the way we kind of perceive that. The Packers did end up tendering all their exclusive rights free agents, so I had mentioned that they had done that for all except maybe 2. Well, now all of them have been signed, so what was expected to be done was done. And then finally, via Matt Zenitz, National College football reporter, I don't know. The Green Bay Packers are hiring Jeff Koon as a member of their defensive staff, sources tell CBS Sports. He worked for West Virginia the last 6 years, including as interim defensive coordinator last season, before WVU coached linebackers at Ole Miss. Oh, before WVU coached linebackers at Ole Miss is how that's supposed to be said. Actually, his comment below kind of elaborates. Before being promoted to interim defensive coordinator last year, spent 5+ seasons as WVU's inside linebackers coach and special teams coordinator. Coached linebackers like 2024 Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year, Josiah Trotter. Also helped WVU rank top 10 nationally in multiple special teams categories in 2023. I think that's interesting. He is being hired as a member of the defensive staff, but who's to say he doesn't make the old switch over to special teams coordinator one of these days? You know what I'm saying? But it's good. I'm excited about it. It seems like they're willing to spare no expense getting all the best coaches they can find to support their defense. And hopefully this is one of those young, up-and-coming, rising stars. And it makes sense that they need to start doing that, because they probably recognize they've got a lot of guys that are likely to get hired away. And so you need guys that can kind of come in, learn under this system, and hopefully be promoted from within. He's got a lot of experience working at pretty big colleges: Auburn, Texas, Iowa State, Louisiana Tech, Cincinnati, North Texas, Ole Miss, and then West Virginia. He's had roles such as linebackers coach, special teams, defensive quality control, safeties, co-defensive coordinator / linebackers. So he has been he's run the gamut for sure. So it'll be interesting to see what his career arc is with the Green Bay Packers. But all right, I am going to leave it at that. Like I said, any big news that comes through, it's only like 1:30 here, so we'll just touch on it tomorrow, unless it involves the Packers. Then we might do sort of a breaking news sort of deal. But have a good day. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.